Hi everybody, my name is Doragon, and this is totally not the video I was planning on making. It's also the second time I've sat down to record this because I didn't make space on my hard drive and I got about 3 minutes of what I recorded previously. Yay! Anyhow, I was planning to make a review on the latest Assassin's Creed Wrath of the Druids DLC. My problem is that when I started to sit down to write the script for it, words started coming out that had nothing to do with the DLC. It was all very much a rant about Assassin's Creed as a brand right now, and the fact that it's got no identity whatsoever. So I thought I'd sit down, set my camera up, set my mic up, and completely unscripted talk about this situation. So hey, welcome everybody, my name is Doragon and this is a rant about Assassin's Creed. So, before we get into it, I want to point out a couple of things. A couple of series that I really like, that I think are absolute pinnacles in video gaming, and that have changed pretty much everything about themselves. I want to start with God of War, because it's a prime example of what I think is wrong with Assassin's Creed right now. They've gone through very similar processes. So God of War launched in 2005, I think, was the first game. So 2005, God of War launched on the PlayStation 2. And it was this beautiful Western hack and slash, pretty much the first of its kind. There was nothing else out there like it at the time. And it was brilliant. Like, there's no other way to put it. It was a brilliant game, beautifully realised story, super tight combat and controls. And it was just superbly excellent. There was nothing bad about it. God of War 2 came along, I believe it was a year later, 2006, possibly 2007. I know the PlayStation 3 was out when it launched. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? New story, brilliant advancing story, but mechanically nothing changed. Because it didn't need to. What was in the last game worked, so they didn't need to change it. We then got a PSP title in Chains of Olympus, which gave you a bit of backstory to Kratos from before, when he was a servant of the gods, and it played exactly the same again. A couple of minute differences because of the way the PSP was set up in comparison to the DualShock controller at the time, so certain buttons had to change, but that was the only real difference. The hardware it was on changing some of the buttons. We then got God of War 3. And it was a masterpiece of the time. It was a pure console seller. The biggest exclusive of 2010 for the PlayStation 3 console. Still looks amazing even today, whether you're playing the original version on the PS3 or the remastered version on the PS4. Epic game, still great story, great mechanics. Load times are a lot shorter than I remember on that game, so it's absolutely brilliant in every single way. You then got Ghost of Sparta, which filled in the time between God of War 1 and 2, where you are playing as Kratos as a god. And then you got Ascension. All of these games are exceptional. All of these games have great stories, brilliant mechanics. They have superb graphics, pushing the hardware that they're on to the absolute pinnacle, and they create a full and cohesive lore around the character of Kratos. But by that 6th game, by the time Ascension came out and we were working on it, playing it, reviewing it, whatever the case may be, there was this massive feeling of been there, done that. If you take each individual game in isolation, nothing wrong with any of them, they should all score near perfect marks. But Ascension sort of broke the camel's back because it was the same again. And after Ascension, It came out, I want to say 2012, tail end of the PS3 era, so it might have been 2012, 2013, can't quite remember. People were tired of it. We'd been there, we'd done that, we were hitting a massive wall of franchise fatigue. Even the most stalwart of fans were hitting this fatigue. And so Sony Santa Monica went away and recreated God of War. They didn't do away with what had come before, not at all, but they did change pretty much everything about it. They changed the location. They changed the main weaponry. They changed the camera. They changed the combat buttons and style. They changed the motivations. They changed the storytelling structure. They changed the engine. And pretty much anything else that you can think of when creating a video game. All of it changed. And yet, the 2018 God of War game still felt unequivocally like God of War. You knew it was in the same franchise, you knew it was in the same universe, even though if you just took the character of Kratos out and gave us a skeleton, everything else is completely different. It was still God of War. It's a parallel cause and reaction to what Assassin's Creed has gone through. First game came out in 2007 and it was mechanically sound. I thought narratively and gameplay wise, even though it was repetitive and looping over, I thought it was brilliant because it linked so well with the narrative. You've got to re-become a master assassin to become a master at anything. You repeat the steps over and over again. Assassin's Creed 2 improved on pretty much everything. From the graphics to the mechanics, taking the engine as far as it would go, using the same engine as the last game. You were doing basically the same things, but it was improved. Brotherhood and Revelations, same again. 3, new engine, new graphics, new-ish mechanics, but overall very much the same. 5 games in at this point, and people were starting to feel franchise fatigue. Now, what Ubisoft could have done there is take a break. They could have stepped back, and the next game that launches, which was Black Flag, could have been amazing. Black Flag was amazing without the step back. It revitalized what a lot of people wanted to feel, but at its core it was still inherently Assassin's Creed. Yes, you weren't playing as an assassin. You only became an assassin in the last couple of sequences of the game. But the core of it was still Assassin's Creed, and you could see what the story was doing, how it was bringing you round to that Assassins versus Templar story in the historical sectors. There was the intrigue of Juno, who had been released at the end of Assassin's Creed 3, that was popping up everywhere in the modern day sections. They were linking the stories together quite well. There was the introduction of concepts like sages, Isu who had lived before and come back to life. And it played beautifully. It played like Assassin's Creed. Then they started rushing things out. So Unity and Rogue in the next year, Syndicate the year after. We had 3 games in 2 years. 3 games, 2 years. I don't care who you are, that pushes your studios too far. That stretches them too thin. And it showed, because Unity was a buggy, horrible mess upon its launch. It had the possibility to be an absolute gem. But because it was bug-riddled and left to die in an unfinished state, it's classed as one of the worst games in the series now, even though the character and game had the chance to be much more. Rogue was a filthy cash-in, because it just copy and pasted so much of Black Flag that it was simply there to plug a financial gap that would appear from Unity being next-gen only. I mean, don't get me wrong, it still plays incredibly well because it is Black Flag. But I've got Black Flag if I want to play Black Flag. You get me? So by the time Syndicate came around and tried to change things up, they tried to go to this whole number spam idea of combat. throw a few more RPG style ideas in there, the core concept of Assassin's Creed was starting to die. When Origins came out in 2017, after a 2-year break, the core concept was there, but not solidly. The problem I face with that is I really enjoyed the game. It's one of my favourite games in the series, and it's because that core concept doesn't exist yet. What we were growing into with the Origins setup, because as far as I can tell, that's what Origins was. It was a setup, it was a starting point and a building block for what came next, and what came next should have been more Bayek and Aya, and the growth of the Brotherhood of Assassins. But we didn't get that. So the growth of the next game was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which had none of the core concepts of an Assassin's Creed game. Now, I'm not saying the RPG era is the problem, or at least RPGs themselves are the problem with the franchise identity. Yes, they have an effect upon the gameplay loop and what you're doing. But there are many more things that make Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed. Because first and foremost, Assassin's Creed is a stealth game. Assassin's Creed is a stealth franchise. The most fun and the most rewarding moments in this entire series are when you infiltrate somewhere completely unseen, when you set up an assassination, plan it perfectly, put the right people from the right factions in the right places, and pull off a completely unseen murder. And then casually walk past all of the guards as if nothing's happened. That is the best thing about this series. That is what Assassin's Creed does so damn well. But we have not seen that since Unity. Syndicate tried, but when Syndicate was better just going in and firing guns, it lost that stealth core that made Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed, that made the millions upon millions of fans buy the game year upon year upon year. It lost everything that made it what it is. Origins, you're forming the creed, and bits of the creed, bits of the tenets, bits of that core came in more and more as you played. But Origins is that, it's an origin point, it's a starting point. It doesn't go through to the point where all of that is cemented and the core has been rebuilt. I would have really liked to do that, to rebuild the core of Assassin's Creed yourself, to be that first mentor of the creed. Imagine the feelings everybody would get from that. But no, we went instead to 300 years before the creed even existed, before the guys in the last game who created the creed had even been born. And we were given someone with superpowers. We were given grunt enemies that you could wail on for 5 or 10 minutes and they'd still be standing. Now, I don't know about you, but if I stubbed my toe, I'm on the floor rolling around for 10 minutes. So getting stabbed through the neck with a spear, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't just turn around and one-shot the person who's just stabbed me through the jugular. Odyssey lost the core of what made Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed. And this whole argument of, well, it's a bad Assassin's Creed game but a good game, doesn't make sense. It was marketed as an Assassin's Creed. It was sold as an Assassin's Creed. And what we got in our hands wasn't Assassin's Creed. There was nothing there that related it to the franchise and series that had come before it. And it started to hammer home that the franchise identity had been forgotten. Valhalla, whilst trying to rectify some of that, I actually feel made it worse. Because what it did was just bring gameplay elements from earlier in the series back. Initially, I thought this was a great thing. Yes, give us the hidden blade back. Alright, I don't like it being on the back of the wrist. But made sense for the character. They like to wear things out in the open. They're going to face their enemy, they're going to look them in the eye and stab them in the face. Doesn't matter whether it's a blade attached to their body or with an axe. I get that. Makes sense for the character. Actual characterization. I like that. Let's roll with it. Having Hytham teach you the leap of faith, which had been undermined completely in Odyssey after having such an emotional and beautiful setup in Origins. So bringing that back to have to be taught to be this secret, sacred thing of the Assassin's Brotherhood was beautiful and so well executed. Having Basim show you social stealth, stick your hood up, wrap your cloak around you, walk slowly, guards are likely to not see you. The problem is that though all of these gameplay styles were in the game, they weren't core, they were all optional, and none of them worked as well as they have done in the past. Franchise identity is not about the gameplay. It is not about the mechanics or the weaponry. If we look once more at that God of War example, we were playing with the Leviathan axe in the 2018 title, not the Blades of Exile or Blades of Chaos that we had done in the 2010 finale to the series. We were playing with a completely new weapon. We were fighting over the shoulder rather than in a stationary camera angle that didn't move, that you couldn't move with. We couldn't jump anymore, which got me out of so many bad situations. There was no magic. Remember, you could fire lightning from your hands in the first game? Summon a whirlpool whirlwind thing in the third game? Bring the wrath of the Titans with big boulders flying everywhere in the second game? None of that existed in 2018's title. No magic at all. So much changed, but it was still God of War. The core of what God of War is was intact. It was still that action hack and slash title with a massive godly element thrown atop it. That's what God of War is. Metal Gear Solid is a stealth infiltration game with over-the-top boss battles. And it doesn't matter whether you're playing Metal Gear way back from the 80s or Metal Gear Solid 5, the swan song to the series, the unfinished masterpiece. They are both unequivocally Metal Gear because of that core concept. Their stealth infiltration doesn't matter whether you're back here or up here, and they both have over-the-top boss battles. But Assassin's Creed hasn't managed to do that. My problem is, I want the series back that I fell in love with. If a TV show did this where it completely lost its identity, people would start switching off. The show would get cancelled because it just doesn't appeal to the core audience anymore. And you're not going to get people jumping in halfway through a 10 season long series to say, oh yeah, well I like it from this point. Screw all the people who've come before. That just doesn't happen. It's the same with a series of novels, or a series of anything. Yet for some reason, Ubisoft have this free pass to gut and butcher all of their franchises, make them completely undiscernible from one another, and people will stand up and stalwartly defend them. And I can't see why. Because I used to love all of these Ubisoft franchises, but what I don't want is my Far Cry game to feel like Ghost Recon. I don't want my Ghost Recon game to feel like Rainbow Six. They're meant to be vastly different franchises. I don't want Rainbow Six to feel like Watch Dogs. And I don't want Watch Dogs to feel like Assassin's Creed. And the problem you've got with the Ubisoft titles right now is that Far Cry feels like Assassin's Creed. Watch Dogs feels like Assassin's Creed. Ghost Recon feels like Assassin's Creed. Rainbow Six feels like Assassin's Creed. Hyperscape feels like Assassin's Creed. But Assassin's Creed, the one that they're feeling like, isn't the Assassin's Creed that the Assassin's Creed fans want. Because the Assassin's Creed that all of these other things feel like is the Assassin's Creed that feels like all of these other things, because everything has been designed and implemented and put out into the world in the same way. I hope Ubisoft see this video. I try not to rant, I try not to rave, and I try not to get angry when I'm putting points across. And I'm not angry with Ubisoft for what they're doing with Assassin's Creed. They're a business at the end of the day. They have staff that they need to pay. There's 3,500 staff at the Montreal studio alone. So 3,500 people worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. In whatever regard that may be, whether it's vacuuming the floors, serving food to all of the staff, or being one of the lead writers or something. 3,500 people worked on that game. In just that studio alone. So they've got to feed them. So they've got to make a game that appeals to so many people to make their money back. They've got to throw the microtransaction store in there because it makes more than the game sales. And we, the fans, will buy into it every single time. I've personally never bought from the Helix store. From AC4 when it was first brought in, all the way through to Valhalla. I've never bought anything from those stores. But the vast majority of the fan base have done. So that store's not going anywhere. It's never going to change. That's always going to be there, and we've got to sort of accept that. But the missing core of what makes Assassin's Creed, that stealth game with a little bit of action and open world reality, that should never be missing. That's what makes the series. It can be wrapped up in whatever sort of gameplay you want it to be. It can change everything about the gameplay if it wants. It can change the graphic styles. It can change the engine. It can change literally everything. But as long as that core of what makes Assassin's Creed is intact, the stealth, the infiltration, the combat, the tenets of the Creed, and this franchise story being Assassins versus Templars and that hidden war, it can be anything else it wants to be and still succeed and still keep fans like myself on board. But the last 2 games haven't had that core. The last 4 games haven't had that core. As much as I like Origins and what it was aiming to do and building towards, it still didn't have that core. So we're 4 games now without Assassin's Creed being Assassin's Creed. And that's not a positive place to find yourself in as a fan, as a customer, as a paying customer. So please, Ubisoft, make whatever sort of style Assassin's Creed game you want. But just do us all a favour. Do your massive fan base a favour, because there are so many of us who want Assassin's Creed as Assassin's Creed that are just drowned out by people with bigger voices in industry who just want homogenous open world adventures, that everything is pointed out to them so that they can get a review out in a week. Give us back our unique series. Give us back the identity of Assassin's Creed. Wrap it up in whatever sort of gameplay and such that you want. But just give us Assassin's Creed. We ask nothing more of you than that. What about you guys? How are you thinking? I've got no idea if Ubisoft are actually going to see this, but if they are, hit them up down below. Let them know what you think about the situation. And maybe I'll actually get my Wrath of the Druids DLC review out at some point, rather than getting to a point where all of the words that I was typing have nothing to do with the DLC. But yeah, you'd probably get an idea of how I feel about it because of this video, but that wouldn't necessarily give it, is it good in terms of Valhalla sort of thing. So I'll probably return to that at some point a little further down the line. But in the meantime, guys, thank you all very much for tuning in. Do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. Hit the bell for notifications. I don't know if it's that way, so you know wherever they are. Point everywhere. Check out some of the other videos that are around as well. Definitely check out that Assassin's Creed ranking video. And in the meantime, guys, have yourself a fantastic day and take care.